So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. We're doing a series of debriefs based on PowerPac's work around the country. And today we're going to be talking about Georgia and the incredible work that people did there to basically save democracy for America. And I just want to let people know that we had a very, I think, successful and important cycle this year. We teamed up with Crooked Media and with the Pod Save America folks and raised, over $900,000 to invest in community-based organizations around the country. Georgia was not one that we did. However, Georgia is very, very important to us. And in 2018, we teamed up with NSA and Leslie to do a fairly large independent expenditure campaign in support of Stacey Abrams. And in that process, identified over 270,000 infrequent voters of color. And we were able to show that 69% of them turned out in that election. So we were quite successful in really boosting it. And the work of NSA and Leslie was critical to that. We're trying to actually do these as an educational kind of forum for donors to understand kind of what the work looks like on the ground. As you all know, PowerPac's mission, vision is to really strengthen the community groups that represent the voices of our communities and to really kind of engage them and have them raise the level of sophistication in their ability to work in voter turnout, voter engagement, et cetera, and to really kind of swing a lot of these states that we work in to our side. So I want to, introduce NSA, who's with New Georgia Project Action Fund, C4 there, and Leslie, who is with America Votes, and they're a C4 that's been active in Georgia. And I want them to, I'm going to give them a chance here to talk a little bit about their work, what they've done. And I wanted to start out with NSA. So if you could take it away and let us know all the great work you did.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you for inviting us, Andy, to participate. I'm very proud of the work that we have been able to do with the support of PowerPac and others over the years. And actually, I think that is the story, right? The idea that, the New Georgia Project Action Fund is able to sort of meet this moment. We have the sort of progressive infrastructure with the support of the America Votes table and Leslie and his leadership to meet this powerful moment in my home state of Georgia. It is not lost on me. I think it's probably well known at this point that on our C3 affiliate, the New Georgia Project, Inc., has helped nearly 500,000 Georgians of color and young people register to vote in all 159 of Georgia's counties. I think that that's important to point out and note because it is so clear, particularly given the coverage in the aftermath of the November general, that people think about Georgia as Atlanta and not Atlanta. Right. And that's it. There's very much a binary. And the truth is that with 159 counties, 7 major cities, and a geographically sort of massive black belt with 20 counties in the state that are majority black, they are also rural. I think that, the thing that's beautiful about the work that we've been doing over the past couple of years in coalition with the other C4s in the state is that, we have completely shattered misconceptions, perceived notions, traditional wisdom about what a rural voter is. I think that rural voters often code for white conservative. That's also, when we think about suburban voter, that's often code for white voter as well. And Georgia smashes those conventionally held notions regularly. So Yeah, at the core of the work that we do is a bold and aggressive research agenda. And so just because we are Black-led, just because we are a multiracial organization, just because we're women-led and a youth-led organization, doesn't make us automatic experts in Black politics and youth politics, et cetera. We study to show ourselves approved. And what we are building is designed to make sure that we win, and then we're able to defend those wins beyond one election cycle. And so, yes, I'm very excited about the work that we're doing. I'm very excited to tell you how we are going to build on top of the wins that we already have experienced in Georgia on this sort of March to January 5th.
So if I could ask you a question and say, can you comment maybe on either anecdotes about some things that were really important about the work that you did this last cycle, or or can you talk a little bit about some of the voter suppression that was going on in Georgia, and what are some of the things you have to fight to kind of win?
I'll do a little bit of both, right? So Georgia has both a long and a recent history of voter suppression. And I think that it's really important to flag that, right? That we're talking about, we saw elevated Black, Latinx, and AAPI turnout in the face of massive voter purges. Nearly 2 million people have been purged from the voter rolls, while under Secretary of State, now our asterisk Governor Brian Kemp's tenure. We're talking about massive misinformation and disinformation campaigns targeting Black and Latinx voters. And, you know, again, we've been complaining and talking about it for quite some time, but if you didn't believe us, you should certainly believe what was in the Mueller report that showed that Black Americans were the #1 target of disinformation by bad actors. At the time, it was foreign bad actors, and our concern and what we've seen is that domestic bad actors have also picked up on those tactics. I have been voting at the same polling location for nearly 20 years. And I woke up on election day to learn that my polling location had been moved. And so as an organization that has spent the better part of 9 months getting Black voters, young voters, new Americans, people who have just become US citizens, to make a voting plan, check to make sure that they're on the voter rolls, check to make sure that they confirm their polling location, to wake up on election day and like, I do this. This is what I do. To wake up on election day and find that my polling location had been changed was quite disorienting. And so we, because again, we had the infrastructure, because we had nearly 3,000 volunteers volunteering with us throughout the election cycle, we were able to for our 4 million in the middle of to despair the campaign example, the brand that they came are very much communities. We quality, high value, high impact color, and these are happening year round. It's not lost on anyone on this call that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, with 1 out of every 1,000 Black Americans having died due to COVID. In Georgia, we're talking about nearly 80% of the people who've been hospitalized are people of color, and 50% of the people who have died are people of color. And so, from our research that tells us that COVID COVID is the #1 issue that voters are voting on, regardless of geography, regardless of race. I mean, now with gender, there is a gender lens, so that tells us that people who identify as women and femmes are concerned about COVID through a healthcare lens, right? Keeping themselves safe, keeping their families safe. And men, people who identify as men, are also voting on COVID, but it is through an economic lens, and like economic anxiety, unemployment, evictions that we're preparing for. And so, again, being able to do research year round, messaging research, but also researching and testing the effectiveness of our tactics, right? Is it 2 knocks, a phone call, and 10 text messages, right? Is it 2 text messages, 5 knocks, a phone call, and, you know, some digital ads, continuously refining our programs so that we understand how to move young people and move people of color to action. And so that's who we are. That's what we do. I would also, when people ask me what do I do for a living and who we are as the Georgia Project Action Fund, I jokingly, but it's also kind of serious, say that we are a tech startup inside of the civil rights and a voting rights organization. And so because of the support of Power Pack and many of our donors, the tried and true, the sort of meat and potatoes, the bread and butter of civic engagement, we're constantly iterating on it to, again, figure out what the formula is, what the secret sauce is. And because our basics are met, it also gives us the freedom and the creativity to innovate. Right? So we build our own mobile apps, we build our own video games. On National Voter Registration Day, our C3 registered 9,000 young people to vote through our activation on Twitch the Vote. Twitch is a streaming platform. It's like YouTube for gamers. And building on that success, New Georgia Project Action Fund was able to host the live stream on the front page of Twitch with tons of gamers, with 500,000 unique viewers. And so it's continuing to talk to young people, continuing to talk to people of color about why their vote matters in this particular moment. We saw a high watermark with participation in these elections, and it is not just because of voter enthusiasm for President-elect Biden, and it is not just anti-Trump sentiment. The work that we're doing to build super voters, people who vote in every election in which they're eligible, is showing up in this moment, and we fully expect it to show up again on the march to the January 5th runoff.
So I want to bring in Leslie here and talk a little bit about, you know, what America Votes has been doing and your work. I mean, we really enjoyed working with you in 2018 and the kind of the breadth of the work that you executed then. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you were up to in this cycle and what you thought were some important lessons here.
Thank you, Andy. And I think before I start, I want to say thank you to everybody who was on the call and is listening here, because the people who were on this call believed in us before anybody else believed, and saw that this was doable, and that SA and I weren't like crying from the winds, like saying that state was winnable. And so I just want to say thank you. I think the big thing that came across this year is that, you know, SA and I started this journey back in 2017, trying to figure out how do we all work together to build a juggernaut of an operation that's ready to take the state on. And when we got here in February of this year, COVID took our knees from underneath us, and we all sat here and we were prepared. We had said that we were going to run the biggest, baddest field operation that the state has ever seen, and we were prepared. We had our budgets together, and we all had to pivot. And with that, we saw the innovation that comes from, you know, necessity, and how we all came together and figured out a way to not only continue what we had started, but to change the electorate. And we together, you know, changed what the state of Georgia looked like by working together and seeing a path. And so what we did collectively, we moved a massive field program into a massive vote by mail operation, where we created a universe that was over 3 million people. We made sure they all got vote by mail applications. And then together, we made over 25 million attempts on the doors when we were able to get back on them, but on the phones and text messages, chasing applications, then also chasing ballots to a point of us having about a 90% return rate. And overall, the state of Georgia had almost 1.4 million vote by mail applications. Vote by mail ballots that were issued, and we had a 90% return rate. And collectively, we can say this, that the work that we did created almost between 500 and 700,000 of them. And Joe Biden got 800 and I want to say a little over 800,000 vote by mail ballots and votes. And so we went out there, we made sure that people knew, we educated them and got the ballots turned back in and changed the electorate. Because when you take vote by mail out of the equation, Donald Trump received 54% of the votes that were cast. But when you add in vote by mail, which was like 25% of the electorate, Joe Biden got 64% of those votes. And so we were able to change an electorate from what it traditionally had been, because traditionally Republicans were getting about between 51 to 53% of the vote. But now we added piece into this, and we were able to change what exactly happened there. And I would say that's through the leadership that, of NSA and a lot of other folks that are around the table, of saying that we were going to pivot, and we were going to make this happen, and we were going to win. And none of us ever looked down. We kept going, and we said that we were going to see it through. We did.
I also know that all of your work, for both of you, spans kind of a lot of different communities, not just the African American community. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the efforts in the Latinx community and API community in terms of things that were kind of important this cycle or going forward?
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited about the Black, brown, and gold progressive majority that we have in the South, and it's showing up not in our work, but also in the electoral results. I think it's important to point out that Asian Americans are the fastest growing group in the state of Georgia. The average age of Latinx Georgians is 17. And so we are coming for that majority very quickly. I think it's important to point out demographics because, they are an important part of this story, but they don't tell the story at all altogether. I think that, and Leslie will be able to talk much more intelligently about this, but we have a proper ecosystem, right? That organizations that are out raising money, running program, our friends at Asian Americans Advocacy Fund are leading the way in sort of dope, innovative voter education materials in multiple languages, showing us how it's done. And I think that, that having the sort of cadence, the regular cadence of thinking about how do we plug holes, filling gaps for our ecosystem, I think is really important. I think it's also important to point out that, Vice President-elect or President-elect Biden won Georgia by a margin of about 14,000 votes. And so when we think about the 200% increase that we're seeing in the broader BIPOC, right, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Latinx, the Black Caribbeans, that we see the new American vote, so folks who have just recently become US citizens, that any one of them exceeds the margin that we saw between President-elect Biden and President Trump. And that is the nature of battleground state politics, that it is a proper battleground, and that those of you who are serious about helping us win and seeing us win, think people are signing up for the idea that we aren't leaving any votes on the table, that again, this multiracial, multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-generational progressive majority that is here in the Deep South, that we have to go out and aggressively ask for and get every vote that we possibly can. That just being right has never been enough. And as a girl child who grew up with 4 brothers, I know this very well. Being right does not automatically mean that you win. And so that is our work. That's the work that we do with the AV table. That's how we won.
Yeah, I'll second everything that Nse said. And I think the only thing that I would add is, we respected each other and respected that we have folks who said that they were the experts in this lane and that we were going to give them whatever they needed to make it happen. And so, we had a couple of groups who, 2018 was the first time they had ever done C4 work. And they showed up in 2020 in a big way because we were able to give them the time to grow and become superstars. And as Nse said, I'm super proud of watching as, Asian American Advocacy Fund came to us and were like, what do you think about PSAs in Korean about vote by mail applications? What do you think about how do we, it's like everybody has hotlines, but let's just create a hotline for folks that are in Korean. Let's create a hotline for folks in Vietnamese. And let's run TV ads, let's run radio ads. Nobody's talking about that. So they fill the gap that we've traditionally said that the campaign side has traditionally said they didn't have the money for. And so they said, yeah, we're gonna fill this gap, and they filled it and made sure that it was covered. And so, as we're looking into the special election and the runoff and how do we do this, I'm super excited about, the conversation that's happening around the Latinx community and how we're trying to set goals of can we knock every Latinx door in the state? What does that look like? How do we all come together to make it happen? We're talking about things from places of before we were like I said, when Nse and I started this thing, we're talking about conversations around scarcity and how do we make $2 turn into 20. Whereas now we're because folks here on this call and because we've shown folks that you can win here. The resources are coming and people are thinking big, and the folks who are on the ground are meeting the moment.
I do think it's important, for PowerPac's experience, I think it's been really important to understand that, Jason Carter lost his election by 200,000 votes. And then you come around, 3-4 years later, and with the efforts of, New Georgia Project Action Fund and the America Votes work, you close the gap down to 50,000, and even that probably was zero because Kemp stole the election.
That part.
Yeah, but then you come in 2020, and here you close it to the point that we win. So we've really seen over the last 6 years a real success in terms of the work that was done on the ground, and really the hard work it has taken to move voters, into the super voter kind of category. That's been really difficult work. I did want to ask you, Leslie, about the same question. So, what are some of your thoughts on voter suppression in Georgia? Are there any other anecdotal stories you may want to convey to our listeners here?
I mean, as they said it, the way I normally say is Georgia is the incubator of voter suppression ideas. And the folks that we're dealing with here are going to come up with something new that we're going to have to be prepared for. I think this morning they were having a conversation around voter registration and how and what are the different ways that you can deny somebody their voter registration card, and trying to make sure they uplift that to the counties and try to make sure they give them a one pager on how to deny voter registration instead of like how do you let people in to the process. And so, I mean, to me, the suppression tactics are going to be, you know, like new. We're going to have new things that we're going to have to accommodate for and that we're going to have to be prepared for. Some of the things I think are going to be things that we're never going to even think, because we're not, I mean, I'm not devious enough to think of ways to try to keep people from voting. Whereas on that side, they're coming up with new and more innovative ways to do this. And so we just have to be as nimble as possible. I think that's where, excuse me, the good part comes in here, where Georgia is finally at a place where, you know, we can all take our lanes, and, you know, NSA sits in that that nexus of the C3, C4, and that federal PAC world. And we have to make sure that all the folks who are sitting in that nexus, but then also the people who are only on the C3 side, or only the C4 side, are fully funded to be able to do this work, and like get to that point where we can actually monitor individual election boards to see what they're doing, because that's where the rules are being made. Because here in Georgia, each of these election boards has their autonomy to be able to run things kind of like almost how they want to, their own little fiefdom, as long as they get the votes counted. And so we have to monitor them, and it's 159 counties, and we just haven't had the resources in the past to make sure that we monitored them and got them to a point that that nothing was slipping through the cracks. And that's where we're going to have to, as we're beefing this up and getting to that next level of how do we monitor them, keep them accountable to us, and make sure that they're, like as the slogan goes, make sure they're counting every vote.
Insane.
I was just going to add that, you know I talked about how it personally impacted me, but because obviously that's what we all care about. But I want to flag that there were 100 polling locations that were moved, over 100 polling locations that were moved in Metro Atlanta within the 48 hours before Election Day on November 3rd. And so we're talking about hundreds of thousands of mostly voters of color that were directly impacted, and like and I don't have to tell anyone on this call that the proper notice wasn't given, that everyone didn't get proper notice, and so yeah, it is. You know, what we're learning is that desperate people do desperate things. That if you've ever had a colleague or a coworker that was about to get fired, and they knew it, and they started like showing up to the work late, stealing office supplies, eating people's food out of the refrigerator, just all together bad behavior. Or, you know, if you were about to go separate ways from a partner, that like, this is the acting out that people see, that you tend to see when people know that it's almost over. And so as we head towards the January 5th run, early voting starts December 14th, we are trying to encourage as many Georgians as possible to request their absentee ballots now, because, you know, holiday mail is notoriously wonky. And then you take that and you add on top of it the attacks on the Postal Service, and then you add on top of that a desperate GOP that is publicly infighting, calling for the resignation of the Republican Secretary of State, you know, out-of-state Republican leaders interfering with our election process, the governor and the White House asking for a third recount of our elections, a third recount that is literally going to give them the same results that they have had 2 times before now. I think that, you know, the support that we need is immediate. I think that, again, in addition to all of the things that we've lifted up, all the things that we've named, this is for the whole kit and caboodle. This is for a governing trifecta. And I know that Mitch McConnell understands how important it is. And so I want to make sure that ordinary Georgia voters understand how important it is as well.
And one thing for our donors that I want to kind of accentuate here. So the mission and kind of focus of PowerPack has been to work with community organizations like these on the ground in states, and that's kind of the character of our work. And so there is a separation and difference between the coordinated campaign and the monies they receive through, you know, donations directly to candidates or directly to the committees that are coordinating with the candidates, so like the party, et cetera. And then there is the work of groups like NGPAF and America Votes that actually focuses the work on the communities, in the communities themselves, and run independent expenditure campaigns and independent campaigns to really focus on that work. And so that's why we are really encouraging people to give directly to organizations like this, because it's really critical to make sure that that part of it is really robust. And a lot of what we've seen over the last 6 years in terms of voters really coming out has everything to do with inspiring those voters on the ground in the communities, talking directly to them, making them feel heard and a part of the process, and so on. And, you know, unfortunately, television ads, radio ads, and so on don't necessarily create that kind of engagement. And so to us, that's the role of groups like NGPAF and the America Votes Table, is that they get to direct voter engagement work in a way that really inspires and encourages turnout. But I wanted to pivot because we do have this battle coming in January. And I wanted to try and check in with both of you about kind of what your plans are and what you're thinking about in terms of the January runoffs. And maybe a little bit on the landscape. How do you think it's going to play out?
I think, as Inslee just said, I think the big thing is, like I said, we had over 850,000 people vote for Joe Biden, and we tracked them by vote by mail. And we have to, because Georgia is the incubator of voter suppression ideas, these folks have to reapply for a vote by mail application. And so a big thing is that we have to get to as many of them as possible, educate them, let them know that they have to reapply. And that's the work that's happening now. And so getting to that point, and I think the good thing coming out of Friday, we got the first vote by mail absentee ballots file, and it was over, I think, almost 800,000 people had requested a ballot at that point. And we saw that almost 400,000 of them were in our universe. And so it felt good that we're getting started, and hopefully be able to get as close back to that 800,000 folks that we need to account for. After that, now that we've had almost 9 months with COVID, I think we've started to try to figure out how do we do the work that we do best. Like Andy, just like you said, and I mean, I think I can say this. When I look at New Georgia Project, I think that the DNA is talking to people and having conversations with folks. And the thing that we want to be able to get back to is the fact that New Georgia Project can be the biggest, baddest operation that knocks as many doors as possible and has authentic conversations with people and educates them right there at the door and lets them know that they need to, why this is important, why we need them to show up. And so over the next 5 weeks, together, we're trying to put together the biggest canvas operation that the state's ever seen. And trying to see, can we get to a point where we've knocked every Black door in the state? Can we do this and make sure that there's not a person out there who can say they didn't know anything about this election? And so that's the starting point. I think the hard side has to do their job, and we trust that they are. But on our side, right now we're doing everything that we possibly can to account for, the holidays, the fact that people have been tired out by this election. But like we saw from our friends across the Chattahoochee over in Alabama, when you show people that they can win, they want to be a part of being a winner. And so now that Georgia has been shown that they can win, I think that we have a population that's ready and hungry to continue winning. And so we just got to put the resources and the people in place, and the people here on the ground are ready to go. And I've been having detailed conversations that make it I laugh because when we first started having a lot of these conversations a couple of years ago, we only had 3 weeks to do this. And we were trying to figure out, from election day, how do we get all of these people back out to vote by, Thanksgiving. And so right now, everybody's like around the country, they're saying, well, Georgian Democrats don't come out for elections, for runoffs. I'm like, we only had 3 weeks in the past to figure this out. And so Chambliss and Jim Martin, it wasn't really a fair fight. Whereas now, I got 9 weeks to get back out there and actually organize. And I don't know if I'm right here, but the talking point that I've been, trying to think through a lot with this election is this is the third 9-week federal runoff. 9-week runoff we've had because of the decree. And with the runoff in 2017 for CD6, the underdog won in Karen Handel, even though John Ossoff came out on top in the first round. And we had another 9-week runoff for the gubernatorial election on the Republican primary in 2018. Casey Cagle was on top, and Brian Kemp came out on top because he was able to organize. In both situations, the underdog was able to organize. And this time around, we're the underdog, but we have the ability to be able to organize, and we have the time frame, and we have the mindset. And then I also say we have the mindset while the other side is actually eating their own because they can't understand how they lost, and we're over here grinding while they're over here fighting in public. And so that's my take on this. Can we do it? Yes. Are the pieces in place? Yes. Do we have a heavy lift? Yes. Can we do it? Yeah. We got it. But we gotta make sure it happens. And I think we're all grinding it out and make sure it does.
Yeah. We've been looking at some polling data that says that voter enthusiasm is still extraordinarily high. I'm super jazzed and pumped about that. We also recognize that we have to overcome the sort of noise of Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's, Kwanzaa, Festivus for the rest of us, and all of the above, right? And so I think that this is the opportunity. But on the other side, within the first 48 hours of the elections being certified in Georgia, we had 10,000 people requesting to do volunteer shifts with us, right? We launched our distributed volunteer organizing, our phones, our texts, our door knocking, and we have 5,000 people, or like 4,800 people to sign up for shifts today on a Monday. And so, we have been building for this moment. I think that, particularly like in the progressive ecosystem, but also definitely in the South, folks are used to having their hearts broken. And so like you fight, right? But like you kind of like prepare yourself to have voter suppression be at play, to have, tons of voter information or misinformation be at play, that, the parties and the candidates do something ridiculous to disappoint you and to, neutralize the impact of all the work that you've done. And that is not the approach that we're taking in this moment. Like, we are doing all of the things that one does when they expect to win, because we do. Like, period. We've shown it before. Now, the fact that the national news media just got to this party doesn't mean that we haven't been turning up for years, right? And so that's the kind of excitement that we are feeling in this moment. Like, Georgia voters believe that it is possible. I have people who have given us money, who have knocked on doors with us and helped us register people to vote, who were like, I still was shocked, right? Like, I saw the plan, I saw the numbers, you laid out the theory of winning, and I still was shocked. And so those are people who like have invested in us and invested in our work. And now we're looking at Georgians, like ordinary citizens who are like, who feel special, who know that they're powerful, and they're gonna keep getting messages about how powerful they are in this moment. And we think that it is going to move people to action, that we are going to be able to make a credible fight. Like, again, this is in battleground state politics, you fight for every vote. And we have some willing partners, some enthusiastic partners, and an excited electorate, and that we are taking them with us all the way to, January 5th.
So we just have a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask you guys, because, part of this is to really get donors familiar with your work and to really take a serious look at providing support to you guys. Do you have any kind of estimate of how much you might need to raise in this window, and what you're trying to put together to execute the programs that you really want to execute?
I think overall, nothing into what's been raised, or just the massive budget at this point, we're looking at about 30 to 35 million on the doors. And then from there, TV, radio, I don't even know how big that's going to possibly get, but I think it's possibly also another 5 to 10, probably 15. So I think we're probably looking at like at least about a $50 million budget just we start thinking about mail, with the vote by mail programs, and then with the direct voter contact, which also includes doors, phones, and text messages across the board. And the interesting thing is, I think we have the core group of folks who've been here that we're starting from, but these numbers are getting bigger because so many people want to play and want to come and want to be a part of this conversation. And so I think that's the starting point, but it's probably going to get bigger. That because we're up against a well-financed GOP that controls the financial resources within the state, and so we're prepared. And so we have to, prepare for this fight as if, these numbers that we're using here are numbers that maybe a bit smaller compared to what's coming from the other side. And so I think the TV is going to be a matching game. And I remember Andy in 2018. I remember us having these conversations of, how do we without us being able to talk to Stacey and her camp, how do we keep them at parity with the GOP? How do we keep this going? And it's the same conversation right now. That Ossoff and Warnock and the DS, they're going to go hard and try to keep parity, but we're going to have to, on our side, help out. And so it's going to be a lot of TV, a lot of radio that's going to be done to keep parity. But then on the ground, I mean, this is going to be a drag out fight for, as they said, every vote that we can find. And so the ambition here of, as they was saying, how do we put as many volunteers to work? How do we do this? How do we get to, 2 to 3 passes on a universe of every voter that we would ever want to possibly talk to, because we're going to have to pull them all out to be able to win this. And so that's a baseline number, around 50 million, but I think it's going to get bigger.
Great, thanks so much. Hensei, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, we have about a $17 million budget between the C4 and our PAC. And the idea is we want, 40% of the ballots, early vote ballots that were turned in by Georgians were from voters under the age of 40. So old millennials down to Zoomers. Every time I think about the fact that we are GOTVing people who were born in 2002, I shudder a little bit. And then we realize that it's our responsibility that, the sort of conventional wisdom about youth turnout is often about how unreliable they are. I don't think that that's the story. I think the story is how inconsistent we are in talking to them and continuously bringing folks in. There is a reason why our grandparents are super voters. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's direct communication to them about why their vote matters, why they are important. There's a lot of courting, so people understand what they read, what they listen, the podcasts that they listen to, et cetera. And so we want to create a different culture for youth engagement. We want to create a different culture for people of color engagement, for rural Black voters engagement. And we're being consistent. We are advertising and targeting with really smart, sophisticated messages in the publications that they read. And yeah, and we go into and we build in communities, and we don't have this sort of boom and bust, the feast and famine of electoral cycles. That again, we're trusted messengers. People know who we are, and so folks are going to expect to see us in terms of getting out the early vote. And so all of that takes resources. And so that is where we are. We have plans. We bought out the remaining inventory for Spotify for digital ads as well as video ads. And so, yeah, in order to compete with all of the holiday noise that corporations are going to sustain because people want to, get into the black by the end of the year. It's going to require us to have some room to be creative, to be innovative, to go super hard. And so, yeah, that's where we are with our $17 million budget.
So thanks so much for all of that. I mean, for all the donors that are watching, you can contact us for information on how to directly give to both organizations, New Georgia Project Action Fund, and to the America Votes table in Georgia. As you can see, it's going to be a very intense race. $50 to $60 million that needs to be raised. We're going to be doing at PowerPack everything we can to support their work. And we've had, tremendous experience working with them in the years past and over the last decade working with all of you. And so I want to thank everybody for watching. I don't know if Nsé or Leslie, if you have any closeout comments you'd like to make.
This is happening. This is happening. I think that, part of our work, and I mean Leslie as well, is to build a bigger we, all right, and we the people. And so, for folks who were focused on their own states, we're focused on other sort of swing state and battleground state priorities, know that there is an entire generation, an entire cohort of smart, sophisticated, connected organizers and operatives in Georgia who worked together that made this happen, that it wasn't magic, and that it's what we've been building on the ground for quite some time, and that the thing that we need to scale is for other people to believe in what we're building and help invest in it.
I'll end this as I began by saying thank you. This is like, as Nsé said, this is a team effort and a big we here. Here in Georgia, we have a really big sandbox that hasn't been completely filled, and we have enough space for people to come and play. And if y'all want to come and talk and want to be a part of this this conversation, we want you to come and talk to us, because we've built a great ecosystem and a great community here that can only become bigger and stronger. And I want to thank you for believing and seeing that there's possibilities here in Georgia.
Well, I do want to close by saying thank you guys. We've been really inspired by your work over the years, and really think that you guys helped save democracy in America. I think we all kind of were relieved to see Trump, losing. Now, hopefully we can actually get him out of the White House. But, your guys' work in Georgia has been inspiring, has been amazing, has been kind of a real game changer for the country, and I think for our communities in particular. I do want to let folks know that this is a part of a series. Next week, we're going to be having Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist from Michigan talking about how we helped flip Michigan, and how they played a role in saving democracy in America as well. So join us next week, December 1st, for that one. And I just want to thank Nsé and Leslie for their participation, and thank you all for watching today. And we will have video of this, and we'll get that to all of you and to all of the other donors that weren't able to make it today. Thanks so much.